You sit here now wondering why you ache when others do not. You breathe in the room's energy before you speak. You feel too much, too deeply. And when people call you kind, it tastes like both praise and punishment. You've been told your empathy is your gift, and yet it often feels like a silent affliction, a subtle crucifixion of your spirit upon the crosses of others. But what if I told you this? Your empathy may not be a gift bestowed by the divine, but a scar left by your past. The empaths, as we so often call them in modern parlance, is not some spiritually elevated creature hovering just beyond humanity. No, the empath is a psychological survivalist, a soul that was forged in fire. And most hauntingly, the empath is often a child who was never allowed to be selfish, never permitted to have boundaries, needs, or even a true identity. Let us descend into the symbolic night of your psyche. And you will see what I mean. In your earliest years, you learned one lesson too well, that your existence was only safe when you served the emotions of others. Perhaps your mother wept too often, her sorrows dripping into your cradle like an endless rain. Or maybe your father's anger crackled like a storm, and you learned how to read the winds of his mood before he even opened his mouth. Either way, your nervous system became a tuning fork for danger, a seismograph for others' inner worlds. This is not compassion. This is adaptation. The child becomes the empath, not through spiritual enlightenment, but through emotional starvation, and instead of crying out for food, attention, or affection, which might have made them seem selfish, they learned to feed on invisibility. To survive, they had to disappear. And so their boundaries dissolved like salt in water. They became what others needed them to be, because the alternative was too terrifying. You think you love too much, but the truth is you were never shown love as something that includes you. This is why, my friend, I say the empath is a child who was never allowed to be selfish. Because selfishness, true, healthy selfishness, is not sin. It is a declaration: I exist, I matter, I am not merely a mirror for others' projections. In a world obsessed with productivity, goodness, and usefulness, the empath becomes a saint in a prison. They cannot say no. They cannot walk away. They feel what others feel, because long ago their survival depended on it. But what the world calls empathy is often hypervigilance. What the world calls intuition is often a trauma-mapped strategy for safety. Let us return to the unconscious now. There, in the mist, we find a dream. A child stands in a forest of eyes. Every tree stares. Every bush whispers. The child walks barefoot, not making a sound, because sound brings punishment. The child's heart is loud, but their mouth is silent. They hold a lantern, but it is for others. They are the guide, the light, the warmth. But who guides them? That child is your archetype. That forest is your family. That silence is your wound. You see, in analytical psychology, every repeated emotion is a myth your soul keeps telling. The empath myth is one of sacrifice, the martyr archetype bound in emotional chains. But sacrifice without resurrection is not holy. It is just slow death. Now imagine In that dream, the child suddenly sits down. They put out the lantern. They close their eyes. For the first time, they are not available. The eyes around them blink in confusion. The whispers grow louder. Why won't you help? They say. Why won't you feel our pain? But the child is still, for once, they listen only to their own heartbeat. This is the birth of the self. You must understand the self, the central archetype of wholeness, does not emerge from empathy. It emerges from differentiation to become whole. You must first learn to stop absorbing. You must become selfish, not in the petty, egoic way, but in the sacred way that says, I, too, deserve to live. You think you are strong because you can feel what others feel. But true strength is feeling your own feelings and not apologizing for them. Let us go deeper now. In the unconscious lies your shadow, all that you repressed in order to survive. For the empath, the shadow often contains rage, desire, entitlement, and ego. All the traits you were taught would make you bad. But without these, you cannot be whole. An empath without a shadow is a servant in disguise. A saint addicted to martyrdom, a soul that has confused emotional slavery with spiritual service. Your healing will begin not when you feel more, but when you feel differently, when you stop flinching from your own anger, when you stop swallowing your needs, when you stop apologizing for not wanting to carry someone else's chaos, and when you realize that boundaries are not walls, they are sacred altars. Many empaths are drawn to healing professions. They become therapists, spiritual guides, nurses, counselors. But if they have not healed their own archetypal wound, the forbidden selfishness, then they become parasites of their own kindness. They give to feel worthy. They heal others to avoid healing themselves. Their light is a transaction. Their compassion is a contract signed in childhood. If I fix you, maybe I will be safe. But safety is not the goal of individuation. Wholeness is, and to become whole, you must reclaim the parts of you that once frightened others. The demanding child, the angry child, the selfish child, because that child was never wrong, only silenced. You were never meant to be a sponge. You were meant to be a soul. The dream returns. This time, the child carries a mirror, not a lantern. And when others look into it, they see not their pain, but the reflection of a boundary, a line, a choice. The empath becomes not a healer, but a revealer. And some will hate you for it. They will say you've changed, that you're cold, that you're selfish. But that is how you know you are healing. The final stage of the empath's journey is not sainthood. It is sovereignty. You are not here to absorb the world. You are here to transform it. And that requires you to know where you begin. And they end, even Christ wept alone in the garden, asking for the burden to be lifted. Even the Buddha left the palace in secret. Even the divine chose individuation. Why should you be any different? You cannot serve the world if you are enslaved to its emotions. You cannot be a vessel if you are leaking, and you cannot love truly until you are willing to be hated for your truth. Now, do you see? The empath is not broken, but they are not whole yet either. They are halfway between the wound and the wisdom. between the past and the possible, and the bridge between those two is what we call conscious selfishness. That is where your healing begins. And now it is time to return to your own soul, not as a servant, not as a hero, but simply as you, so many of you come to me asking, why do I attract the wounded? Why do I end up in relationships that drain me? Why do I feel responsible for everyone's healing, but no one feels responsible for mine? And I look at you not with pity, but with recognition, because what you call love is often the reenactment of a sacred trauma. You, the empath, are not simply seeking connection. You are seeking redemption. You are trying to rewrite the original betrayal, the one that happened when you first learned that your needs were too much, your joy too loud, your sadness inconvenient. You believe that if you can love them enough, if you can heal them enough, you will finally be loved in return, not for what you give, but for who you are. But that is the illusion, and illusions live in the unconscious like ghosts, repeating themselves in every lover, every friend, every crisis. When we dive into dream work, we often find recurring images in empaths. An empty house they cannot leave, a crying child locked in the attic, a mirror with no reflection. These are not coincidences. These are symbols of a fragmented psyche. The empty house, that is the shell of a self-abandoned in childhood. The crying child, that is the inner one who was taught that silence equals safety. The mirror, that is the ego stripped of identity, shaped only by the gaze of others. You have lived inside these dreams even while awake. You have built homes in others, but none in yourself. You have memorized the patterns of everyone else's pain, but forgotten the shape of your own soul. And now you are exhausted, not because you are weak, but because you are finally ready to stop performing compassion and begin practicing wholeness. I want you to hear this. It is not noble to bleed for those who would not bandage you. It is not spiritual to erase yourself in the name of love. It is not divine to carry burdens that are not yours. That is not compassion. That is self-abandonment dressed in sacred robes. If the child within you was never allowed to be selfish, then as an adult, your healing is to become unapologetically whole, to reclaim the selfishness that was once condemned, because that selfishness was never about ego. It was the soul's cry, I am here. I exist. I matter. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to leave the room. You are allowed to feel rage. You are allowed to not be okay. You are allowed to love yourself even when others are hurting. And yes, you are allowed to choose yourself. We must not confuse shadow work with self-denial. The purpose of shadow integration is not to kill the ego, but to illuminate the parts of you that have been buried in shame. The empath's shadow is thick with guilt. Guilt for saying no. Guilt for resting. Guilt for needing, guilt for walking away. But that guilt is a ghost. 2, it is the voice of a long dead contract. If you are good, you will be loved. And yet, what is goodness? If it costs you yourself, what is love? If it requires your disappearance, let me tell you now, empathy without boundaries is not healing. It is repetition. It is the soul reenacting its imprisonment and calling it virtue, but you are here not to reenact but to reawaken. When the self begins to rise, it does not shout, it whispers, and its first words are often terrifying to the unhealed part of you. I don't want to help them anymore. I don't care what they think. I need space. I deserve joy. Do you see? These are not the words of arrogance. These are the first breaths of a soul learning to belong to itself. You have mistaken kindness for sacrifice. But true kindness includes the self. You have mistaken empathy for absorption. But true empathy has a border, a sacred edge that says, this is me, that is you. You are not failing because you feel burned out. You are awakening because your old ways are no longer sustainable. The martyr must die so the self can live. In mythology, every transformation requires a descent. In the myth of Inanna, she descends into the underworld and is stripped of her titles, her yevils, her power, until she stands naked before her sister, Ereshkigal, the dark goddess of the unconscious. There, say these, but it is through that death that she is reborn whole. So fine, unafraid, you too must descend. You must meet the dark goddess within the one who holds your anger, your need, your pain, your forgotten selfishness. You must let the good one die. The helper, the fixer, the one who smiles through the ache. Only then can the authentic self rise, the one who feels with others, not for them. The one who can hold space without losing form. The one who can say, I love you, but I will not carry your pain anymore. Yes, the empath is just the child who was never allowed to be selfish, but that child is still inside you, waiting for permission to stop performing, to be loud, to take up space, to say no without explanation, to rest without guilt, to receive without fear. Can you imagine what that would feel like? To no longer be the emotional sponge, to no longer be the caretaker, to no longer be the background music in someone else's movie. The ego resists this at first. It whispers, you'll be alone. They'll leave you. You'll become like the ones who hurt you. But that voice is not truth. It is trauma. The ones who made you feel unsafe when you had needs were not selfish. They were unconscious. You, on the other hand, are becoming conscious, and that changes everything. For consciousness carries choice, and choice is the seed of freedom. Now you must choose. Will you continue the myth of martyrdom, or will you become the author of a new story? In this new story, you do not heal others to be loved. You love yourself, and in doing so, you offer the world your truth, not your servitude. You no longer shrink to fit their comfort. You expand to match your soul. You are no longer the candle burning out to give light. You are the sun radiant. Whole, so verein, and those who cannot stand your light, let them seek their own sun. You are not here to be the emotional regulator for the unhealed. You are not here to be the therapist of every partner. You are not here to be the container for everyone else's chaos. You are here to become yourself. And that, my dear empath, is the most sacred work of all. There is something sacred in the moment you stop apologizing for existing. It is not loud. It is not defiant. It is quiet, like the sound of a door unlocking inside your own bones. You have stood for too long on the shoreline of other people's needs. refusing to swim in your own soul. But the tide is shifting now. The empath is waking up not into more giving, but into self-reclamation. This moment is holy. This unraveling of identity you call kindness is not a collapse. It is a return, a remembering of all the pieces you left behind in order to be loved. Do you feel it? The ache that has followed you for years is not a flaw. It is a signal of your buried self, whispering from behind your curated smile. And if you are brave, truly brave, you will stop trying to fix others and instead begin the more frightening journey of seeing yourself. You've hidden behind their wounds for long enough. Now it's time to name your own. What happens when an empath finally looks in the mirror and sees not a healer, but someone desperately in need of healing? This is the terror, and it is also the key. Many of you have mastered the roles of caretaker, listener, guide, but inside there is a child sitting in the dark with bandaged hands. She has held everyone's broken pieces so tightly that her own skin has split. She has never been asked how she feels. She has only been praised for how good she is at making others feel better. And so she learned to survive by abandoning herself. You do not need to keep playing this role. You are not here to be a saint. You are here to be whole. And sometimes wholeness requires you to disappoint the very people you once lived to please. Do you hear that rustling? That is your authenticity trying to breathe. Let us go deeper still. In your shadow, there is a locked chest, one you've guarded your entire life. And in it are the feelings you were forbidden to feel: anger, desire, resentment, arrogance, selfishness, each one exiled by your inner judge, each one labeled dangerous. But here's the paradox: until you integrate what you have rejected, you will remain fragmented, a healer with an untreated wound, a giver who secretly resents giving, a lover who never feels loved. You cannot transcend what you refuse to touch. You must open that chest, and you must do so without shame. Your anger is not evil. It is sacred fire that reveals your boundary.